The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipping through the brass mail slot of Thaddeus Caney's penthouse office like a whisper in a storm. It landed on the polished marble floor with barely a sound, yet somehow it seemed to echo through the vast emptiness of his life. Thaddeus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape of Seattle, his reflection ghosting against the glass like a man who had forgotten how to see himself. At 42, he had everything the world. Measured as success, a technology empire worth billions, properties on 3 continents, a face that graced magazine covers with headlines about genius and innovation. But the man staring back at him in that window was hollow, carved out by years of prioritizing profit over people, ambition over affection. His dark hair, threaded with premature silver at the temples, was immaculately styled. His charcoal suit fit perfectly across his broad shoulders. His green eyes, once bright with dreams, now held only the cold calculation of someone who had learned to quantify everything except what truly mattered. The letter sat there on the floor for nearly an hour before his assistant, Mirabelle Chen, arrived with his morning espresso and stack of contracts requiring signatures. She noticed it immediately, bending to retrieve the simple white envelope that looked so out of place among the embossed corporate correspondence that usually filled his mailbox. The envelope was wrinkled, as though small. Hands had gripped it tightly, and the address was written in careful, looping letters that betrayed the writer's young age. There was no return address, only a single word written in the corner: hope. Mirabelle, a woman in her 50s who had worked for Thaddeus for 15 years, and was perhaps the only person who remembered when he still smiled, held the envelope up to the light with curiosity creasing her weathered face. She had seen him transform from an idealistic young entrepreneur who wanted to change the world into this distant, untouchable figure who measured everything in quarterly earnings and market share. She handed him the envelope without comment, though her dark eyes held a question she would never voice. Thaddeus took it absently, his mind already calculating the logistics of the merger he was orchestrating that would dismantle a family-owned manufacturing company and put 300 people out of work. Efficient, his board called it. Necessary, the shareholders agreed. But the word that haunted his rare moments of stillness was something else entirely: ruthless. He set the envelope on his desk, a massive structure of black walnut that had once belonged to a railroad baron, and returned his attention to the cityscape. Another day of conquest stretched before him, meetings scheduled in 15-minute increments, decisions that would affect thousands of lives made over lunch he would barely taste. The envelope sat there through his morning conference call with investors in Tokyo, through the video meeting with his legal team about the pending acquisition, through the brief conversation with his executive chef about tonight's dinner party for politicians whose favor he was cultivating. It was not until early afternoon, when a rare gap appeared in his schedule and the office fell into an unusual quiet, that Thaddeus finally picked up the envelope and turned it over in his hands. The paper was inexpensive, the kind sold in bulk at discount stores. Whatever was inside had created a small bulge, something more than just a letter. With movements precise and controlled, he slid his finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, clearly torn from a spiral notebook, and a photograph. The photograph slipped out first, landing face up on his desk. It showed a girl of perhaps 10 or 11 years old, standing in front of a weathered brick building with a sign that read, "Riverside Children's Home." She had wild auburn hair that seemed to defy any attempt at taming, pulled back in a lopsided ponytail. Her face was a constellation of freckles across pale skin, and her eyes, an unusual shade of amber, looked directly at the camera with an expression that was simultaneously guarded and hopeful. She wore clothes that were clean but obviously second-hand, a purple sweater with stretched cuffs and jeans with patches on the knees. But it was her smile that stopped him, a small, uncertain curve of her lips that suggested she was not used to reasons for smiling, but was trying anyway. Something in that smile pierced through the armor Thaddeus had built around himself, reaching a place he thought he had successfully buried years ago. He picked up the letter with hands that trembled slightly, a physical response he could not remember experiencing in at least a decade. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope, careful and deliberate, as though each word had been considered with grave importance. The letter began without preamble or formal greeting. My name is Juniper Wilde, and I am 11 years old. I live at Riverside Children's Home, and I have been here for 4 years since my mama died. They say she got sick real fast, and there was nothing anybody could do. I do not remember much about her anymore, except that she smelled like vanilla, and she used to sing this song about mockingbirds when she put me to bed. Sometimes I wake up at night and I can almost hear it, but then it is gone again. Like smoke. I am writing to you because my teacher, Miss Harriet Bloom, said we should write letters to people we admire for a class project. Most of the kids picked celebrities or athletes, but I picked you. I read an article about you in a magazine someone left in the common room. It said you grew up in foster care too, and that you did not have anyone, and that you made yourself into someone important anyway. That is what I want to do. I want to become someone important, so that maybe someone will want me. I know that sounds stupid, but it is true. The article said you started your company in a garage when you were only 23 years old. It said you were a genius with computers, and that you could see things other people could not see. It said you never gave up even when everyone told you your ideas would not work. I want to be like that. I want to be someone who does not give up. I am not a genius with computers, but I am good at drawing. I draw all the time on any paper I can find. I draw the things I wish were real. I draw families sitting around dinner tables. I draw houses with gardens and dogs playing in yards. I draw mothers braiding their daughters' hair and fathers teaching their sons to ride bicycles. Miss Bloom says I have talent and that I should keep drawing. She is the nicest person I know. She volunteers at the home twice a week to help us with homework, and she always brings cookies she bakes herself. She never looks at us like we are broken or like she feels sorry for us. She looks at us like we are just regular kids who happen to live somewhere different. I wish I could have a family like the ones I draw. There are couples who come to the home sometimes to meet the kids. They always want the little ones, the babies and toddlers who do not remember being somewhere else. They do not want kids like me who are too old and who have memories that make us sad sometimes. Mrs. Carmichael, who runs the home, says I need to smile more when the couples come because nobody wants a gloomy child. But it is hard to smile when you know they are just looking past you to the smaller kids behind you. Last month a couple came and they talked to me for almost 10 minutes. The woman had blonde hair and she smelled like roses. The man wore a suit like the one you were wearing in the magazine picture. They asked me questions about school and what I like to do. I told them about my drawing, and the woman seemed interested. She asked to see some of my pictures. I showed her my favorite one, a drawing of a family having a picnic by a lake with mountains in the background. The mom in the picture has red hair like mine, and the dad is tall and wearing glasses. There are 2 kids, a girl who looks like me and a little boy with curly hair. Everyone is smiling and the sun is shining and there is a dog catching a frisbee. The woman looked at it for a long time and her eyes got shiny like she might cry. Then she handed it back to me and said it was very beautiful. They left that day and they never came back. Mrs. Carmichael said they decided to adopt a 3-year-old boy named Tommy instead. Tommy is nice and I am happy for him, but I cried in my room that night when nobody could hear me. I am writing to you because I want to know how you did it. How did you become someone when you started as nobody? How did you make people see you when you were invisible? How did you stop feeling empty inside? The magazine article did not say anything about that part. It just talked about your success and your money and your big company. But I want to know about the other part, the part they do not write articles about. Did you ever feel like there was a hole in your chest where a family should be? Did you ever wake up in the middle of the night feeling scared and alone and wishing someone would come check on you? Did you ever wonder what it would feel like to have someone proud of you just for being you, not for what you accomplished or achieved? I know you are probably too busy to write back. Important people usually are, but I wanted you to know that reading about you gave me hope. Hope is what I named my stuffed rabbit that I have had since I was 7. She is pretty worn out now, and one of her ears is hanging by a thread, but she is mine, and she listens to all my secrets. I told Hope the rabbit about you, and about how maybe if you could make it, then maybe I could too. Maybe I will. Not always be the kid nobody wants. Maybe someday I will be someone people write articles about. Maybe someday I will have a family of my own, and I will never let them feel alone the way I feel alone. Thank you for reading my letter if you got this far. I know it is long and probably boring compared to all the important things you have to do, but writing it made me feel a little less invisible. If you ever want to write back, Miss Bloom said she would help me with the address and everything. But if you do not write back, I understand. I just wanted you to know that you matter to someone even if you do not know them. You matter to me. Your friend, I hope, Juniper Wilde. Thaddeus read the letter 3 times, each reading pulling him deeper into emotions he had spent 20 years trying to escape. His throat tightened, with something that felt dangerously like tears, an impossibility for a man who had not cried since the day he turned 18 and aged out of the foster system with nothing, but a duffel bag and a determination to never be vulnerable again. He picked up the photograph again, studying Juniper's face with an intensity he usually reserved for market analysis and competitor research. Those amber eyes looked back at him with a haunting familiarity. He had seen those eyes before in the mirror during those early years, when he was still trying to figure out how to survive in a world that had no place for unwanted children. He remembered being that kid, the one the prospective parents looked past, the one who was too old, too angry, too damaged. He remembered the foster homes, 14 of them in 12 years, each one teaching him a little more about disappointment and betrayal. He remembered learning to trust no one, need no one, depend on nothing except his own intelligence and willpower. That was how he had become Thaddeus Kane, technology titan and corporate legend. He had transformed pain into ambition, loneliness into single-minded focus, the need for love into the hunger for achievement. He had built an empire on the foundation of not needing anyone, of proving that he did not require the validation or affection he had been denied. But sitting there in his palatial office with a letter from a girl who reminded him of everything he had been running from, Thaddeus felt the careful architecture of his emotional isolation begin to crack. Have you ever felt like something was missing from your life, like you built everything you thought you wanted but somehow ended up empty anyway? Have you ever looked at your success and wondered why it does not fill the void inside you? Juniper's words are not just her story, they are a mirror reflecting something we all face. Take a moment right now and write in the comments. I choose to see what really matters. Write that down, not just for yourself, but for someone else who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes we need to be reminded that being someone important is not about what we achieve, but about who we become for others. Write it now. I choose to see what really matters. Thaddeus set the letter down and turned his chair to face the window again, but this time he did not see the city. Instead, he saw himself at 11 years old, sitting in a group home not unlike Riverside, staring at a library computer and teaching himself to code because it was the only thing that made sense in a senseless world. He saw himself at 16, working 3 jobs while finishing high school, sleeping in a shelter, showering at a gym, never telling anyone because he had learned that vulnerability was weakness, and weakness was dangerous. He saw himself at 23, launching his first software product from a borrowed garage, working 20-hour days because sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant remembering what he did not have. The success had come faster than anyone predicted. His algorithms revolutionized data security. His innovations transformed how businesses operated. Within 5 years, he was a multi-millionaire. Within 10, a billionaire. He had homes he rarely visited, cars he never drove, art he never looked at. He attended charity galas where people praised his philanthropy, never knowing that he wrote those checks because it was expected, not because he felt anything for the causes. He had relationships, if they could be called that, with women who were attracted to his power and wealth, but never got close enough to see the emptiness underneath. He had colleagues and employees and business associates, but not friends. Friends required trust and trust required vulnerability, and vulnerability was something he had eliminated from his life with surgical precision. Yet here was Juniper Wilde, an 11-year-old girl from a children's home, asking him the questions he had been avoiding for decades. How did you stop feeling empty inside? The truth was, he had not. He had simply become so good at ignoring it that he almost believed his own lie. Until now. Until this letter that should not matter, from a child he had never met, pierced through every defense he had constructed. Mirabelle knocked softly on the door, her signal that his next meeting was approaching. Thaddeus did not respond. She knocked again, then opened the door a crack. "Sir, the board is waiting in the conference room. They are ready to finalize the Meridian acquisition." Thaddeus looked at the documents spread across his desk, the contracts that would make him another $100 million and destroy a company that had been family-owned for 3 generations. He looked at the letter, at the photograph of a girl who wanted to be someone, who believed that becoming important was the answer to loneliness. He was living proof that she was wrong. "Cancel it," he said quietly. Mirabelle's composed expression cracked with shock. "Sir, cancel the meeting. Cancel the acquisition. I am not signing. But sir, the board, the shareholders, we have been working on this for 8 months. Tell them I changed my mind. Tell them whatever you want. But I am not doing it." Mirabelle stood in the doorway, her mind clearly racing through the implications. She had never heard him speak with this tone, something raw and unfinished in his voice that stripped away the corporate veneer. After a moment, she nodded slowly and closed the door. Thaddeus picked up his phone, a device he used for everything except what it was originally designed for: actual communication with other human beings. He called his personal assistant, a young man named David who managed his schedule with military efficiency. "David, I need you to find out everything you can about Riverside Children's Home: location, administration, how they are funded, what they need. I want a complete report by tomorrow morning." There was a pause. "Of course, sir. May I ask what this is regarding?" Thaddeus looked at the photograph again, at Juniper's uncertain smile. "Personal reasons," he said, and ended the call. He spent the rest of the afternoon doing something he had not done in years: nothing. He sat in his office with Juniper's letter in his hands, reading it again and again, each pass revealing new layers of meaning. She was asking him for answers he did not have, for wisdom he had never acquired. She thought he had figured out how to be someone, but all he had figured out was how to appear successful while remaining fundamentally disconnected from everything that made life worth living. That evening, instead of attending the political dinner he had planned, Thaddeus drove across the city to a neighborhood he would normally never visit. Riverside Children's Home was located in a section of Seattle where the streets were cracked and the buildings showed their age. It was a brick structure 3 stories tall, with bars on the lower windows and a small playground out front where the equipment looked worn but maintained. He parked across the street and sat in his car, watching. Children moved. Behind lit windows on the upper floors, he could see a common room where several kids sat around a television. A woman, probably a staff member, moved through the frame carrying a laundry basket. It looked nothing like the facilities where he had spent his childhood. Those had been larger, more institutional, places where children were processed rather than cared for. But the feeling was the same, that sense of temporariness, of lives on hold, waiting for something that might never come. As he watched, a girl appeared at one of the third-floor windows. Even from a distance, he recognized the wild auburn hair. Juniper stood at the window looking out at the darkening street, her expression distant and thoughtful. She held something in her arms, probably the stuffed rabbit she had mentioned. For several minutes she just stood there, a small figure framed by the window, and Thaddeus felt something shift inside his chest, like tectonic plates moving after being locked in place for decades. He understood suddenly that this was a crossroads, that the man who drove away from this place tonight would be different from the man who had arrived. He could go back to his life, back to the carefully constructed world where nothing touched him and nothing hurt him and nothing mattered except the next achievement. Or he could do something terrifying. He could let someone in. He could respond to a child's honest cry for connection with honesty of his own. He could admit that all his success had not answered the questions that haunted him in the dark hours before dawn. He could acknowledge that he was still that foster kid looking for a place to belong, just wearing an expensive suit now. Thaddeus drove home through streets slick with rain that had begun to fall, the city lights blurring into abstract patterns through the water on his windshield. His penthouse felt more empty than usual, the carefully curated furniture and art suddenly looking like stage props in a play. About a life rather than an actual life. He poured himself a scotch, a single malt that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and it tasted like nothing. He stood at his windows looking out at a city where millions of people were sitting down to dinner with their families, watching television with their kids, reading bedtime stories, doing all the ordinary things that he had convinced himself he did not need. At midnight, he sat down at his personal computer, not the one he used for work, but the one he used for the rare moments when he engaged in something beyond business. He opened a blank document and stared at the cursor blinking on the white screen. For a man who commanded words in boardrooms and negotiations, who could craft presentations that moved markets and speeches that inspired stockholders, the simple act of writing an honest letter to a child seemed impossibly difficult. He thought about lying, about telling her that the emptiness went away, that success filled all. The holes that becoming important was indeed the answer she was seeking, but Juniper had written to him with raw honesty, and she deserved the same in return. He began to type. Dear Juniper, I received your letter today, and I have been thinking about it all afternoon and evening. I want to thank you for your honesty and your courage in reaching out to someone you have never met. Your letter touched me more deeply than I can properly express. You asked me questions that deserve real answers, not the polished responses I am used to giving. You asked how I became someone when I started as nobody. The truth is, I am not sure I ever stopped feeling like nobody. I just got very good at pretending. You asked how I made people see me when I was invisible. The truth is, I built things that were impossible to ignore, but the person behind those things remained invisible anyway. You asked how I stopped feeling empty inside. The truth is, I did not. I just filled my life with so many things that there was no time to notice the emptiness. These are probably not the answers you were hoping for. You wanted a roadmap for escape, a formula for transformation, proof that the pain you feel now has an expiration date. I wish I could give you that. But what I can give you is this. You are already someone. You have always been someone. Being someone is not something you achieve or earn or prove. It is what you are. The world may not see it yet. The couples who come to the home may look past you. But their failure to recognize your worth does not diminish it. I built a very successful company. I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. I have accomplished things that most people only dream about. But sitting here tonight, reading your letter, I realize that I have spent 20 years chasing the wrong things. I thought if I became powerful enough, rich enough, successful enough, then somehow that would prove I mattered. But it did not work. No amount of achievement can fill the hole left by growing up unwanted. You wrote that you draw families, the kind you wish were real. I think that is beautiful. I think that shows you know what really matters, something I forgot or maybe never learned. Those drawings are not fantasies or childish wishes. They are your understanding that connection and love and belonging are what make us human. Do not let anyone, not the couples who choose younger children, not the people who look past you, not even the voice in your own head that says you are not enough, convince you to stop believing that you deserve that kind of life. You do deserve it, more than you know. I do not know what my letter to you should be. I am not good at this. I am good at algorithms and strategy and seeing patterns in data. I am not good at feelings or connections or being the kind of person who knows how to comfort an 11-year-old girl who is experiencing the same pain I experienced at her age. But I will tell you this, you are not invisible to me. Your letter, your story, your drawings, your hope, all of it matters. You matter to me, and I am someone who generally does not let things matter. I do not know what happens next. I do not have a plan, which is unusual for me. But I wanted you to know that I read your letter, all of it, and it changed something in me. You said I matter to you even though you do not know me. Well, you matter to me now too, even though I do not know you. Maybe that is enough to start with. I will write to you again. That is a promise, and I am someone who keeps his promises. In the meantime, keep drawing. Keep creating the world you want to see. And know that somewhere in this city, there is someone who sees you, who recognizes something of himself in you, and who is grateful you had the courage to write. Your friend, Thaddeus Caney. He read the letter over 3 times, each time resisting the urge to edit out the vulnerability, to restore the professional distance, to protect himself with careful language. Finally, he printed it, folded it into an envelope, and addressed it in his own handwriting to Juniper Wild at Riverside Children's Home. He drove back across the city at 1 in the morning and dropped the letter in the mailbox outside the children's home, then sat in his car for a long time looking up at the darkened windows. The next morning, David delivered the report on Riverside Children's Home. It was thorough and sobering. The facility housed 32 children ranging from infants to teenagers. It was chronically underfunded, relying heavily on private donations and volunteer support. The building needed repairs. The staff was overworked and underpaid. The budget for educational supplies and extracurricular activities was nearly non-existent. Children aged out at 18 with minimal preparation for independent living. The success rates for former residents were bleak. Thaddeus read the report twice, then called his accountant. I am setting up a private foundation. I want to fund it with $50 million initially. The focus will be on supporting children in foster care and group homes, with emphasis on education, mental health services, and transition support for aging-out youth. His accountant, a man who had handled Thaddeus's finances for a decade and was unflappable by nature, actually gasped. $50 million? To start. It may need more. We will call it the Juniper Foundation. Sir, is this some kind of tax strategy I am not aware of? No, Thaddeus said simply. This is something else entirely. Over the following weeks, Thaddeus did something unprecedented in his carefully controlled life. He became personally involved, not through intermediaries or delegated responsibilities, but actually involved. He visited Riverside Children's Home and met with Mrs. Carmichael, the director, a woman in her 60s who had devoted her life to caring for unwanted children with resources that were never adequate, and recognition that never came. He told her about the foundation and watched her face transform from professional caution to disbelief to tears. He met with the staff, listening to their challenges and frustrations. He walked through the facility, noting everything that needed repair or replacement. He sat in on an art class taught by Miss Harriet Bloom, the volunteer teacher Juniper had mentioned. Miss Bloom was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers who talked about her students with genuine affection and respect. But he did not meet Juniper, not yet. He was not ready, though he could not articulate why, perhaps because she represented something too real, too raw, perhaps because meeting her would require him to be honest in person in a way he had only managed to be honest in writing, perhaps because he was afraid. He received her reply to his letter on a Wednesday afternoon. Mirabelle brought it to him personally, recognizing the same simple envelope and careful handwriting. Thaddeus took it to his office, closed the door, and stood looking at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was another letter and 2 drawings. The first drawing showed 2 people sitting at a table writing letters to each other. The details were remarkable for someone so young. The expression of concentration on their faces, the way the light fell through a window onto the page, the suggestion of connection across distance. The second drawing showed a small figure, standing in front of a large building that was clearly meant to be his office tower. The figure was looking up with an expression of wonder. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Caney, I cannot believe you wrote back. When I gave Miss Bloom the envelope to mail, I did not really think anything would happen, but then your letter came and Mrs. Carmichael brought it to me, and I thought maybe it was some kind of mistake. I have read your letter so many times that I almost have it memorized. I thought you would tell me that everything gets better and that working hard solves all problems. But you told me the truth instead. That means more than you know. You said you still feel empty inside, even though you are successful. That makes me sad, but it also makes me feel less alone. I thought maybe there was something wrong with me that I feel empty. I thought maybe other people do not feel this way. But if you feel it too, then maybe it is just part of being human. My friend Sophie, she is 8 and she has been here for 2 years. She says that feeling empty just means there is room for love to come in someday. I do not know if that is true, but I like thinking about it that way. Thank you for saying, I am already someone. I am trying to believe that. It is hard sometimes. Yesterday a couple came and they talked to some of the younger kids, and I tried to remind myself that it does not mean anything about me. But it still hurt. Miss Bloom says that hurt is like rain, it comes and goes. And helps things grow even though it is not pleasant. I am trying to believe that too. I wanted to tell you about something that happened last week. We had career day at school, and people came to talk about their jobs. There was a firefighter and a nurse and a lawyer and other people. At the end, the teacher asked us to write about what we want to be when we grow up. Most of the kids wrote about the jobs they heard about. But I wrote something different. I wrote that I want to be the kind of person who helps other people feel less alone. I do not know what job that is. Maybe there is not a job like that. But that is what I want. After I wrote it, I realized that is what you did for me with your letter. You helped me feel less alone. So maybe you are already doing that thing even if you do not realize it. I wanted to ask you something. You wrote that you are not good at feelings or connections, but your letter was full of feelings even if you do not think it was. You told me true things that were hard to say. That takes feelings. Maybe you are better at feelings than you think. Maybe you just have not practiced in a long time. I'm including 2 drawings with this letter. One is of us writing letters to each other. I have never seen you except in the magazine picture, but I drew you the way I imagine you, sitting in a big office but looking less lonely than in the photograph. I hope that is okay. The other drawing is of me standing outside your building. Miss Bloom told me where it is. Sometimes when I cannot sleep, I imagine walking there and looking up at all the windows and wondering which one is yours. I imagine that somewhere in that big building there is someone who knows I exist, and that makes the whole city feel less big and scary. Is that strange? Mrs. Carmichael told me that someone has been donating money to the home. They bought new art supplies and fixed the heater and got us new clothes. She would not say who it was, but she had this look on her face like it was someone special. I wondered if maybe it was you, but I did not want to ask in case I was wrong. If it was you, thank you. If it was not you, thank you anyway for writing to me. Miss Bloom says I should not get my hopes up too much about having a pen pal. She says you are very busy and important, and I should not expect letters all the time. She is just trying to protect me in case you stop writing. But I think I would rather have hope and risk being disappointed than not have hope at all. Is that stupid? You said you will write again, and you said you keep your promises. I believe you. That is my choice, to believe you. Even if I am wrong, I would rather believe and be wrong than never believe at all. I'm trying to follow your advice about drawing the world I want to see. Today I drew a picture of a family where the dad is teaching the daughter to use a computer. In the picture, they are both smiling and there is a dog sleeping under the desk. Maybe someday that could be real for me. Not the exact picture, but the feeling of it. Do you think that is possible? Thank you for seeing me. You wrote that I am not invisible to you, and I keep thinking about that. Nobody has ever said anything like that to me before. It makes me feel real in a way I have never felt real before. Please write again when you can. I will understand if it takes a long time. I know you have important things to do, but if you can write even just a little, I will be here. Your friend Juniper. Thaddeus set the letter down and picked up the drawings, studying them with an attention he normally reserved for technical specifications and market projections. The skill was evident even to his untrained eye. These were not childish scribbles, but genuine artistic expression with depth and perspective and emotional resonance. But it was the content that undid him. She had drawn him looking less lonely. She imagined standing outside his building and feeling connected. She believed in hope even when it might hurt her. He called Miss Bloom's number, which he had obtained from Mrs. Carmichael. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm and slightly suspicious. "This is Harriet Bloom." "Miss Bloom, this is Thaddeus Kane." There was a long pause. "Mr. Caney. Juniper told me she wrote to you. I did not know if you would actually respond." "I did respond. I am responding. And I would like to meet her if that is appropriate, and if she wants to meet me." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Caney, I need to be direct with you. Juniper is a remarkable child, but she is also a vulnerable one. She has experienced abandonment and disappointment repeatedly. I encouraged her to write to you because I thought it would be a good exercise in reaching out. But I never expected you to write back. Now that you have, I need to know what your intentions are. Are you planning to be a consistent presence in her life, or is this a momentary impulse that will fade when you return to your normal routine?" It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. Thaddeus looked at the drawings spread across his desk, at the evidence of a child's hope manifested in colored pencil and imagination. "I do not know yet," he admitted. "I do not have experience with this. I do not have children. I do not have family. I do not have close friends. I have a very carefully constructed life that has no room for complications or emotions or anything that I cannot control. But something about Juniper's first letter broke through all of that, and I know that sounds dramatic or unlikely, but it is true. I am not making promises I cannot keep, but I want to try. I want to see if I can be someone different than who I have been." Miss Bloom was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice had softened slightly. "That is honest. I appreciate that. But you need to understand what you are taking on. These children have been rejected so many times. Every disappointment reinforces their belief that they are not worth keeping. If you start this and then walk away, you will do damage, real damage." "I understand," Thaddeus said, though he was not entirely sure he did. "All right," Miss Bloom said slowly. "I volunteer at the home on Thursday afternoons. If you want to come by this week, I will be there. We can see how it goes. But Mr. Caney, one more thing." "Yes?" "These kids do not need another adult who treats them like a charity project or a good deed. They need someone who sees them as whole people worthy of respect and care. If you cannot do that, do not come." "I will be there Thursday at 3, he said. Thursday arrived with rain, the kind of persistent drizzle that made Seattle gray and soft-edged. Thaddeus arrived at Riverside Children's Home exactly at 3, parking his car on the street and walking to the front entrance with none of his usual confidence. He had faced down hostile boardrooms and aggressive competitors, had negotiated billion-dollar deals and pitched revolutionary ideas to skeptical investors. But standing in front of a children's home about to meet an 11-year-old girl made his hands shake slightly. Mrs. Carmichael met him at the door, her expression cautiously welcoming. "Mr. Caney, thank you for coming, and thank you for everything you have done for us. The foundation has been life-changing." He nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Where is Juniper?" "She is in the art room with Miss Bloom. But before you go in, I want you to see something." She led him down a hallway lined with children's drawings, past a common room where several younger children were playing under the supervision of a staff member, to a small room that served as an office. On the wall was a bulletin board covered with drawings. "These are all Juniper's work," Mrs. Carmichael said. "She draws compulsively. Sometimes I think it is the only way she knows how to process her feelings." The drawings were variations on themes, families, homes, connections, belonging. But they were interspersed with darker images too, lone figures in empty spaces, barred windows, storm clouds. The contrast was striking, the tension between hope and despair rendered in a child's hand. "She is special," Mrs. Carmichael continued, "too smart for her own good sometimes, too sensitive, too aware of everything she does not have. The couples who come here, they do not know what to do with a child like that. They want simple and uncomplicated. Juniper is neither." "What will happen to her?" Thaddeus asked, unable to look away from the drawings. "She will age out at 18. We will do our best to prepare her, but the statistics are not good. Most of our kids who age out struggle. Some end up homeless, some fall into substance abuse, some disappear and we never know what happened to them. A few make it, find their way, build lives, but it is hard, very hard. Thaddeus felt something dark and angry rise in his chest, a fury at a system that warehoused children and abandoned them to adulthood unprepared and unsupported. "Are you ready?" Mrs. Carmichael asked gently. He nodded, not trusting his voice. She led him to a large room at the back of the building that had clearly been converted into an art space. There were tables covered with supplies, walls hung with children's work, shelves stuffed with paper and paints and clay. Miss Bloom was working with 3 children at one of the tables, and sitting. By herself in the corner by the window, drawing with fierce concentration, was Juniper. She looked exactly like her photograph, wild auburn hair pulled back, freckles across pale skin, wearing a yellow sweater that was slightly too large. But seeing her in person, watching the way she bit her lower lip while she drew, the way her shoulders hunched as though she was trying to make herself smaller, hit him with unexpected force. Miss Bloom looked up as they entered, then said something quietly to the other children and walked over. "Mr. Caney," she said, her handshake firm and her eyes assessing. "Thank you for coming. Juniper does not know you are here. I thought it would be better to let you observe for a moment before I tell her." He watched Juniper draw, her hand moving across the paper with confident strokes. Even from a distance he could see she was creating another family scene, this one showing people baking together in a kitchen. "Ready?" Miss Bloom asked. "No," he said honestly, "but let us do it anyway." Miss Bloom walked over to Juniper and spoke softly. Juniper's head jerked up, her eyes widening. She turned to look at Thaddeus, and for a moment they just stared at each other across the room. Then, slowly, Juniper stood and walked toward him with a hesitancy that suggested she was not sure if he was real or if she had imagined him. She stopped a few feet away, studying his face with those remarkable amber eyes. "You came," she said quietly. "I did," he replied. "I wanted to meet you in person." She nodded slowly, still processing. "Your building is really tall. I looked it up on the computer." "It is," he agreed, then found himself saying something completely unplanned. "But it is just a building. You are more important than any building." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. "Nobody has ever said I am important before." "Well, they should have," Thaddeus said, and meant it absolutely. They stood there in the art room of a children's home while Miss Bloom discreetly moved the other kids out to give them privacy. Finally, Juniper spoke again. "Do you want to see what I am working on?" "Very much," he said. She led him to her corner where her drawing was spread across the table. It showed a kitchen with sunlight streaming through windows. A woman with dark hair was rolling dough while a man with glasses was measuring ingredients. A girl with red hair was cracking eggs into a bowl. Everyone was smiling. "It is what I imagine families do together," Juniper explained. "I have never baked anything, but I think it would be nice." "You are very talented," Thaddeus said. "These drawings are extraordinary." "Thank you," she said shyly. "Miss Bloom says I should go to art school someday. But I do not know how that works for kids like me. There would be scholarships," he said, "financial aid, ways to make it possible." She nodded, but he could see the doubt in her expression, the ingrained belief that good things happen to other people. They spent an hour together that afternoon. Juniper showed him more of her drawings, explaining each one with a seriousness that was both heartbreaking and endearing. She asked him questions about his work, his life, his company. She wanted to know if he liked being rich, if having a lot of money made him happy. "I thought it would," he answered honestly, "but it did not." She nodded as though this made perfect sense. "Maybe happiness is not about things. Maybe it is about not being alone." "Maybe," he agreed, feeling that tectonic shift in his chest again, that cracking of foundations he had thought were permanent. When it was time for him to leave, Juniper walked him to the front door. "Will you come back?" she asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the fear in her voice. "Yes," he said, "I will come back." She smiled then, that same uncertain smile from the photograph, but warmer somehow, more real. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Driving back across the city, Thaddeus called his attorney. "I need to know what is involved in becoming a foster parent," he said without preamble. His attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Valdez, who had handled his legal affairs for years, did not immediately respond. Finally, she said carefully, "That is not usually your kind of question. I know, but I need to know." "There is a process," she said slowly. "Background checks, home studies, training classes, evaluations. It takes time, and it is intrusive. They will examine every aspect of your life." "Good," he said. "Start the process." That evening, Thaddeus did something he had never done before. He cleared his schedule. Every meeting, every engagement, every commitment for the next month was moved or delegated or cancelled. His executive team was stunned. His board was concerned. His shareholders were alarmed. But Thaddeus was done living according to other people's expectations and measurements. For the first time in 20 years, he was going to figure out what he actually wanted rather than what he was supposed to want. Over the following weeks, he became a regular presence at Riverside Children's Home. He came on Thursday afternoons when Miss Bloom was there, then started coming other times too. He did not just visit Juniper. He met the other children, learned their stories, listened to their dreams and fears. He funded renovations to the building, upgraded the computer lab, established scholarship programs. But more than the money, he gave time. His time, the commodity he had always hoarded most. Jealously. He taught coding classes to teenagers who had never imagined they could do something like that. He helped younger children with homework. He sat with kids who needed someone to listen. And slowly, the children who had learned to be invisible learned to be seen. His relationship with Juniper deepened into something that defied easy categorization. He was not her father, not yet, maybe not ever in the formal sense, but he became someone important in her life, someone she could count on, someone who showed up consistently and cared about her consistently. He attended her school functions. He displayed her artwork in his office, replacing abstract paintings by famous artists with drawings by an 11-year-old girl who understood more about what mattered than he had learned in 42 years. She taught him how to see differently, how to value things that could not be quantified or leveraged. She showed him her world through her drawings and her observations. She made him laugh, something his employees would not have believed possible. And she gave him purpose beyond profit, meaning beyond achievement. The foster certification process was exactly as intrusive as Patricia had warned. Social workers examined every corner of his penthouse, questioned his lifestyle, interrogated his motives. Some were skeptical that a billionaire workaholic could provide appropriate care for a child. Others were concerned about the power differential, the potential for problems. But Thaddeus was patient, answered every question honestly, completed every requirement. Miss Bloom became an unexpected ally, attending meetings with social workers to advocate for him. "He is learning," she told them. "He does not have all the answers, but he is genuinely trying. And Juniper needs someone who sees her, really sees her. He does that." 6 months after receiving Juniper's first letter, Thaddeus sat in a conference room at Family Services being interviewed by a caseworker named Sandra Martinez, a woman in her 30s who had clearly seen too many people fail children. "Why do you want to do this?" she asked bluntly. "You have no experience with children. You have a demanding career. You could help kids in many ways that do not require this level of commitment. Why this?" Thaddeus looked at his hands, searching for words that would convey something he still did not fully understand himself. "When I was a kid in the system, I learned that nobody was coming to save me. I learned that I was disposable, forgettable, worth less than other children who had families. I learned to turn that pain into fuel, into ambition. I became successful, but I never stopped being that kid waiting for someone to choose him. Juniper wrote to me because she is that same kid. She wanted to know how I stopped feeling empty. And in trying to answer her honestly, I realized I never did stop. I just got better at pretending. She looked at me with eyes that still believed connection was possible, that love was real, that families were worth hoping for. And something in me that I thought was dead responded. I am not doing this because I think I have all the answers, or because I think I will be a perfect guardian. I am doing this because for the first time in my adult life I want something that is not about achievement or success or proving anything. I want to be the person who chooses her, who shows up for her, who tells her every single day that she matters. Not because of what she does or what she might become, but because of who she is right now. Sandra Martinez studied him for a long moment, then made a note on her paperwork. The certification came through 3 weeks later. Thaddeus was approved as a foster parent, eligible to provide care for children in the system. But fostering Juniper was more complicated because she was not legally free for adoption. Her mother had died without other family coming forward, making her a permanent ward of the state. The path to adoption would be longer, requiring court proceedings and evaluations, but fostering was possible if Juniper agreed and if Mrs. Carmichael approved the placement. He met with Juniper in Mrs. Carmichael's office on a Tuesday morning when she did not have school. She sat across from him, nervous and hopeful in equal measure, while Mrs. Carmichael explained what was being proposed. Juniper, Mr. Caney has completed the process to become a foster parent. He is asking if you would be willing to live with him, to leave the home and try being part of his family. This would not be adoption, not yet, but it would mean living in his house and being in his daily care. Do you understand what that means? Juniper nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Thaddeus's face. Would I have my own room, she asked. Yes, he said. You would have your own room and we would set it up however you want. Would I still see Miss Bloom and my friends here? Absolutely, he assured her. This is not about cutting you off from people you care about. It is about adding someone new to your life. What if it does not work, she asked, and her voice was very small. What if you decide you do not want me after all? Thaddeus leaned forward, needing her to hear this clearly. Juniper, I cannot promise that everything will be perfect. I cannot promise I will not make mistakes because I probably will. But I can promise that I am not going to give up on you. I am not going to decide I do not want you. You are not on trial. Here, I am the one who has to prove I can do this, not you. She bit her lip, considering. Can I think about it? Of course, Mrs. Carmichael said. This is a big decision. Take the time you need. But Juniper was already shaking her head. I do not need time. I was just being polite. I want to go. I want to try. Are you sure? Thaddeus asked. She nodded, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled without any uncertainty at all, a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. I am. Sure. I have been drawing pictures of what my room could look like for 3 weeks just in case. I am very sure. The transition took 2 more weeks while paperwork was completed and logistics were arranged. Thaddeus worked with an interior designer to create a bedroom for Juniper that balanced age-appropriate design with space for her to make it her own. He set up an art studio in a spare room, stocking it with every supply imaginable. He read books about parenting and trauma-informed care and how to support children from difficult backgrounds. He was terrified. On the day Juniper moved in, she arrived with everything she owned in 2 small suitcases and a garbage bag. Her possessions filled less than a quarter of the closet in her new room. She stood in the doorway looking at the space, at the bed with its soft comforter, at the desk by the window, at the walls waiting for her artwork, and she started to cry. These were not sad tears, but something more complex, a release of years of hoping and waiting and imagining. Thaddeus stood awkwardly beside her, uncertain if he should hug her or give her space, painfully aware of how inexperienced he was at this. It is okay, he said finally. Whatever you are feeling, it is okay. I know, she said through her tears. I am just happy. I did not know happy could make you cry, but it can. That night, Thaddeus ordered pizza because he did not trust himself to cook anything edible, and Juniper told him that pizza was perfect. They ate sitting. On the floor of her room, still mostly empty but beginning to feel lived in, and she told him stories about the home and her friends and Miss Bloom. He told her about his childhood, things he had never told anyone, the loneliness and the survival and the determination to never need anyone. She listened with a seriousness beyond her years, nodding in understanding. "We are the same," she said finally. "We both grew up alone, but maybe we do not have to be alone anymore." "Maybe," he agreed and felt that terrifying vulnerability of hope. The first few months were an adjustment for both of them. Thaddeus had to learn how to structure his life around someone else's needs and schedule. He learned about school pickups and homework help and the importance of being present for dinner conversations. He learned that running a corporation was actually easier than helping an 11-year-old navigate friendship drama or math anxiety. Juniper had to learn to trust that this was real, that she was not going to wake up back at the home, that Thaddeus was not going to change his mind. She tested boundaries, pushing to see when he would give up. She had nightmares and moments of anger, and days when she was convinced this was all going to end. But Thaddeus showed up every single day. When she had nightmares, he sat outside her door until she fell back asleep. When she was angry, he stayed calm and patient. When she was convinced he would leave, he stayed and promised and reassured until she could believe again. Miss Bloom visited often, checking on both of them, offering guidance when Thaddeus was lost. "You are doing better than you think," she told him one evening when Juniper was at a sleepover with a friend from school. "She feels safe with you. That is the foundation everything else builds on. I do not know what I'm doing half the time," he admitted. "Nobody does," she said gently. "Parenting is not about having all the answers. It is about showing up with love and consistency. You are doing that." Gradually, the uncertainty faded into routine, and routine built into relationship. Juniper thrived with stability and support. Her artwork became more vibrant, still exploring themes of family and belonging, but with more confidence, more hope. She made friends at her new school. She joined the art club and the chess team. She started talking about the future with excitement rather than fear. And Thaddeus changed too. He reorganized his company, promoting people into leadership roles and delegating responsibilities he had always hoarded. He still worked, but on a schedule that allowed him to be present for Juniper. He attended her school functions and art shows. He met her friends' parents and navigated the social world of middle school with bewilderment but determination. His business associates barely recognized him. The cold, calculating executive was replaced by someone warmer, more engaged, more human. Some of his board members worried he had lost his edge, but his company continued to perform well, innovating and growing, just without the ruthless, single-minded focus that had characterized his earlier leadership. One evening, about 8 months after Juniper moved in, they were sitting together in her art studio. She was working on a large piece for a school exhibition while he attempted to learn watercolor painting, a process that was humbling for someone used to being immediately competent at everything. "Can I ask you something?" Juniper said, without looking up from her work, always. "Do you think my mum would be happy about this, about me living with you?" Thaddeus set down his brush, giving the question the weight it deserved. "I think any mother would be happy to know her daughter is safe and loved and has opportunities to grow and thrive. So yes, I think she would be happy." Juniper nodded, still focused on her painting. "I cannot remember her very well anymore. Sometimes I feel bad about that." "It is not bad," he said gently. "It is just how memory works. But the love she had for you, that does not fade. That stays even when the specific memories get fuzzy." She finally looked at him, her amber eyes serious. "Do you love me?" The question, asked with such direct vulnerability, could have been terrifying. A year ago it would have been impossible for him to answer, but sitting in that art studio with paint on his hands and a child who had taught him that connection was not weakness, but courage, Thaddeus found the words came easily. "Yes," he said. "I do love you. I did not know I could feel this way, but I do." She smiled, returning to her painting. "Good. Because I love you too, even when you are terrible at watercolors, especially when you are terrible at watercolors." He laughed, and the sound was so unfamiliar he almost did not recognize it as coming from himself. A year after Juniper's first letter arrived at his office, the adoption was finalized. The court proceedings had been extensive and complicated, but Patricia Valdez navigated every obstacle with fierce determination. On a bright morning in October, they stood before a judge who reviewed all the documents and evaluations and recommendations. The judge looked at Juniper over her reading glasses. "Young lady, do you understand what is happening here today?" "Yes, ma'am," Juniper said clearly. "Mr. Caney is going to adopt me. We are going to be a real family. And is that what you want?" "More than anything," Juniper said. The judge smiled, signed the papers, and just like that everything changed and nothing changed. They were already a family. This just made it official. That evening they had a small celebration at the penthouse. Miss Bloom came, and Mrs. Carmichael, and several of Juniper's friends from school, and a few of Thaddeus's colleagues who had become actual friends rather than just business associates. Juniper gave a speech that she had written and practiced, thanking everyone who had believed in her and helped her get to this point. "When I was at the home, I used to draw pictures of families and wish they were real," she said. "I thought becoming someone important was the key to being wanted. But I learned something better. I learned that being wanted is what makes you important. Thaddeus is important because he runs a big company and invented things that changed the world. But that is not why I wanted him to be my dad. I wanted him because he saw me when I was invisible. He answered when I reached out. He showed up when he did not. Have to. That is what makes someone important. Not what they achieve, but who they choose to love." Later, after everyone had left and Juniper was in bed, Thaddeus stood at his windows looking out at the city. The view was the same as it had been a year ago, but everything else was different. He was different. His phone buzzed with a text from Juniper, even though she was just down the hall. The message said, "Thank you for choosing me." He typed back, "Thank you for teaching me what matters." A moment. Later, another message arrived. "This is the happy ending I used to draw, but it is even better because it is real." Thaddeus looked at those words for a long time, then walked down the hall to Juniper's room. Her light was still on. He knocked softly and opened the door. She was sitting up in bed with her sketchbook, drawing by the light of her bedside lamp. He sat on the edge of her bed. "What are you working on?" "A new picture," she said, turning the sketchbook to show him. It was a drawing of the two of them, but different from her earlier work. This one showed them in the art studio, both painting, both smiling, both present. "It is not a wish anymore," she explained. "It is a memory. I am drawing the real things now." "That is good," he said. "That is really good." She set the sketchbook aside and looked at him with those amber eyes that had first reached through his defenses in a photograph. "I am glad I wrote to you." "I am glad you wrote to me too," he said. "Best letter I ever received." She yawned, settling back into her pillows. "Will you still be here in the morning?" "Every morning," he promised. "Forever mornings." She smiled sleepily. "Forever is a long time." "Yes," he agreed. And for the first time in his life, forever did not feel like a threat, but a promise. Not an emptiness to be filled, but a gift to be cherished. He turned off her light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her drift towards sleep in a room that was hers, in a home that was theirs, in a life that had become real. And before this story reaches its end, I want to ask you something. If you connected with this journey, if Juniper and Thaddeus's story touched something in your heart, rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments below. Tell me where you are watching from, what country, what city. And if this story reminded you that being seen, being chosen, being loved is what makes us matter, then hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart. Because we all need reminders that the empty places inside us are not permanent, that connection is possible, that families come in forms we never expected. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Now back to Juniper and Thaddeus. The years that followed were not without challenges. Adoption did not erase Juniper's trauma or instantly heal the wounds of abandonment. She struggled sometimes with trust, with self-worth, with the fear that happiness was temporary. Thaddeus struggled with his own limitations, with The realization that love required vulnerability, that being a father meant sometimes failing and having to try again. But they built something together, a family defined not by biology, but by choice, not by perfection, but by persistence, not by never falling, but by always getting back up together. Juniper graduated from middle school and then high school, her artwork winning competitions and scholarships. She was accepted to a prestigious art school with a full scholarship, though by then, Thaddeus could have easily paid her tuition. But the scholarship mattered to her, proof that her talent was recognized on its own merits. She chose to study art therapy, combining her love of drawing with her desire to help children like she had been. "I want to work with kids in the system," she told Thaddeus when she declared her major. "I want to help them find ways to express what they cannot say. I want to be for them what you were for me." "What was I for you?" he asked. "Someone who saw that I already mattered," she said simply. "Before I did anything or became anyone, you saw me." The Juniper Foundation grew into one of the most effective organizations supporting foster children in the country. But it was not just about money. Thaddeus had learned that resources without relationship were insufficient. The foundation focused on mentorship programs, connecting successful adults who had been through the system with current foster children. He personally mentored several teenagers, sharing his story and listening to theirs. Miss Bloom eventually left her position at Riverside to work for the foundation full-time, developing arts programs in children's homes across the state. Mrs. Carmichael retired, knowing that the children in her care would continue to be supported long after they left her facility. Riverside itself was renovated and expanded, becoming a model for trauma-informed care. On Juniper's 21st birthday, Thaddeus gave her a present that was not wrapped. They were having dinner at home, just the two of them, the way they both preferred for important occasions. He handed her a folder containing legal documents. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "It is ownership papers," he said. "You now own 50% of the foundation. You have always been its inspiration. Now you are its co-director. You will make decisions about how we help kids, what programs we fund, how we grow. I do not want to do this without you." She looked at the papers with tears in her eyes. "This is too much." "This is exactly right," he corrected gently. "You taught me what matters. Now we get to help other people learn that too." She stood and hugged him. This girl who was no longer a girl but a young woman, strong and talented and compassionate, who had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me when I did not know how to be loved." "Thank you for teaching me how to love," he replied. "For showing me that being someone is not about what you accomplish, but about who you become for others." They stood there in the kitchen of the penthouse that had once been a showpiece of success, but had become a home, holding on to each other in the way that families do, imperfect and precious and real. Later that evening, Juniper went into her old art studio, the room that had been her sanctuary through her teenage years. The walls were covered with her artwork, a visual timeline of her growth and healing. But in a frame on the wall in a place of honor was her very first drawing, the one she had sent with her original letter, the family having a picnic by the lake. She stood looking at it for a long time, remembering the girl who had drawn it, the girl who had believed that families were only for other people, who had thought becoming important was the answer to loneliness. That girl had learned something better. She had learned that she was already important, already worthy, already enough. She had learned that family was not something you had to earn, but something you could build with someone who chose to see you. She had learned that love was not a reward for achievement, but a gift freely given and gratefully received. And she had learned that the empty spaces inside could be filled, not with success or money or acclaim, but with connection and care and the daily choice to show up for each other. Thaddeus found her there, standing in front of that old drawing. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, smiling. "I was just thinking about how I used to draw wishes, and now I get to live them." He put his arm around her shoulders. This man who had once measured everything in profit and loss, who had built an empire on emotional isolation, who had needed a letter from an orphan to remember he was still human. They stood together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, not by blood, but by choice, family not by accident, but by intention, connected not by what they had, achieved but by who they had become for each other. The story that began with a letter written in careful, hopeful handwriting had become a life, messy and complex and beautiful, full of ordinary moments and extraordinary love. And if you asked Juniper what she would tell her 11-year-old self, the girl who had stood at a window looking out at a city that felt too big and scary, she would say this: reach out even when you are scared. Hope even when it hurts. Believe that you matter even when. The world has not figured that out yet, and know that somewhere in the emptiness there is someone who will see you, really see you, and choose you, and love you, and help you understand that being someone was never about what you did, but always about who you are. That is the story. That is the truth that matters. And it started with a simple act of courage, a child who wrote a letter, and a man who had the wisdom to write back. So tell me, friends, on a scale of 0 to 10, how did this story resonate with you? Drop your rating in the comments and tell me where you are watching from. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that we all have the power to see each other and choose each other and build families from hope and intention, then share it with someone who needs this message today. Hit that subscribe button for more stories that speak to the heart and remind us what really matters in this complicated, beautiful world. Until next time, remember that you matter. You are seen, and you are never as alone as you think you are. There is always room for more love, more connection, more family, more hope. And sometimes all it takes is the courage to reach out and the wisdom to reach back.